Welcome back to Royal Report Daily. And today we have a story that is shaking the entire British royal family from the inside. Prince Edward and Sophie have just started a very serious and direct fight against King Charles III and Queen Camilla. And this fight is already tearing the royal family apart. At the center of everything is a magnificent house called Bagshot Park, and a tiara that Queen Elizabeth II personally gave to her favorite daughter-in-law. Then Camilla made a shocking move against both of them, and Edward could not just sit back and accept it. He hired top lawyers and placed a set of very important documents on the palace's table, documents that no one saw coming. And what those papers revealed is something the palace never wanted the world to know. This is the story of the man who kept what the king thought he could take back. Don't forget to subscribe to Royal Report Daily and hit that notification bell so you never miss a single update. On March 25, 2026, a team of senior property lawyers walked straight into the Crown Estate offices and placed a legal file on the table. Inside that file was everything Prince Edward had spent years building quietly and carefully. Every signed agreement, every private payment, every piece of evidence that proved exactly what he had been given and what could not legally be taken from him. This was a defense built piece by piece, year by year, for exactly this moment. And at the center of it all was one question that was now cutting through the royal family like a blade. How did the youngest son end up holding something that the king believed he could take back? To understand that, you have to go back to the final decisions made by Queen Elizabeth II before her death in September 2022. She knew exactly what she was doing. She had watched the family change. She had watched pressure build around money, titles, and control. So she made her wishes very clear while she still could. The Duke of Edinburgh title was not up for debate. Elizabeth had already made her decision. The title would go to Prince Edward. This was not an accident. That title had defined Prince Philip for more than 70 years. It was his life's role. Elizabeth made sure it would pass to the one son who stayed steady, stayed out of scandal, and never brought any shame to the monarchy. That promise became real in April 2023, when King Charles III officially gave Edward the title. But this is where the real story begins, because the title was only half of what Edward received. The other half was Bagshot Park, a 120-room Tudor Gothic mansion sitting on 51 acres inside Windsor Great Park. And in her final years, Elizabeth signed a letter of intent that directly connected that estate to the Edinburgh title. That letter was witnessed by Philip as he was dying. He knew exactly why it mattered. He knew that without it, Edward could lose everything connected to that title. So Elizabeth locked it in. The title and the estate were meant to stay together. That was her decision. Stay tuned to Royal Report Daily. We bring you the stories that matter. But after she was gone, a different way of thinking took over inside the palace. For years, Charles had believed something very simple and very dangerous. That as king, he had the final say over royal property, royal titles, and everything connected to them. He believed that modernizing the monarchy gave him the right to review everything, cut costs, make changes, and if necessary, take things back. By 2026, that belief had turned into action, and Bagshot Park became a target. Edward received the dukedom in 2023, after waiting his entire life for it, after watching his father carry that title for decades. And within just 3 years, the same institution that gave it to him began trying to strip away the home that gave the title its meaning. He was not just being challenged, he was being weakened. Because without Bagshot Park, the Duke of Edinburgh title becomes empty. Just a name without a base, just a title without any power. And what makes this even more striking is the truth about what Edward actually took on when he received that estate. Bagshot Park was in terrible condition when it was offered to him. In 1996, when the army chaplain who lived there left, the building was worn out, outdated, and had been ignored for years. The Crown Estate did not even want to keep it as a royal home. There were serious plans to turn it into a hotel or a conference center. That is how little value it held at the time. Instead, it was handed to Edward under a lease signed in March 1998. The terms were clear: a very low annual rent in exchange for a very heavy responsibility. He had to fix the place, not slowly, not over time, right away. And he did it. He personally invested millions of his own private money he earned himself before becoming a full-time working royal. The total cost of repairs was substantial. The Crown estate covered part of it, but Edward carried a serious financial load. Once the work was done, his rent was increased to reflect the correct market value. The National Audit Office confirmed it was appropriate. His brother Andrew, by comparison, lived at Royal Lodge for years without ever paying the proper market rate. The National Audit Office documented it. One brother followed the rules and paid his way. The other did not. And now, the institution that allowed that double standard was turning its attention to the brother who had done everything right. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to Royal Report Daily for more exclusive investigations. Edward went even further. In 2007, he paid £5 million through his company to extend the lease to 150 years. That was long-term planning. His agreement also gave him the right to sell the lease and keep the profit. He built security. He built control. Now look at the situation in 2026. That same property is worth around £30 million. If the Crown estate gets it back, it can be sold or leased for a massive profit. So when pressure started building on Edward to give it up, it was not just about modernizing the monarchy. The financial reason was sitting right there in plain sight. And this is where Prince Philip's role becomes impossible to ignore. He saw this coming. That is exactly why he made sure that letter of intent was witnessed and formally recorded. Philip had spent more than 70 years watching how the monarchy operated behind closed doors. He had watched the institution move quietly and efficiently against the people it no longer found useful. He was not going to let that happen to his youngest son. So as he was dying, he put his name on a document specifically designed to make that impossible. So by the time March 25, 2026 arrived, Edward was ready. The legal file delivered that morning was built on 3 strong points. First, the original lease showing his financial investment. Second, the letter signed by Elizabeth and witnessed by Philip connecting Bagshot Park to the dukedom for his lifetime and beyond. And third, 20 years of records proving he maintained the estate at a level that actually saved the monarchy money. Don't miss a single update. Subscribe to Royal Report Daily right now. But even with all of that, this fight was never just about a house. Earlier in 2026, before the lawyers ever walked in with that dossier, a palace official showed up with a clipboard and a quiet instruction. The visit came from the office of Queen Camilla. It was described as a jewelry audit, a routine review, a national heritage check. That is how it was framed. But what it actually meant was very simple. Someone had come to count and question jewelry that Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, had worn as her own for 25 years. And at the center of that audit was one piece, the Anthemian tiara. This was not a random item pulled from a vault. It was made specifically for Sophie's wedding in 1999. It was personally ordered by Queen Elizabeth II herself. It was built using 4 antique elements shaped in a honeysuckle design, taken from the private collection of Queen Victoria. For nearly 2 decades, it was the only tiara Sophie ever wore. That detail matters more than people think. Sophie was never given open access to the grand state tiaras the way other senior royals were. The Anthemian tiara became her one piece, her one crown. Take that away and she is left with nothing. Camilla's argument came through legal language, but the message behind it was sharp. Because the tiara used gold and stones from Queen Victoria's era, it could be classified as crown property. That meant it should be held in the central royal vault and only taken out for official state use. The meaning was very clear. Sophie would no longer own the tiara she wore on her wedding day. She would have to ask for permission to wear it. That crossed the line, and the logic behind it was dangerous. Because if that argument holds, it does not stop with one tiara. It opens the door to reclaim dozens of personal gifts given by Elizabeth over her 70-year reign. It reaches across the entire family, and it turns back on Camilla herself, whose own jewelry collection comes directly from royal sources. Apply that same rule and her collection falls into the same trap. Edward's legal team saw that immediately. Subscribe to Royal Report Daily and stay ahead of every royal development. This situation also carried something darker behind it. The public had seen this kind of move before. After Princess Diana died, a diamond and emerald necklace given to her by the Queen Mother on her wedding day in 1981 was returned to the royal vault. Then Camilla had it taken out, redesigned into a brooch, and wore it publicly. People did not stay quiet. The reaction was immediate and angry. That memory never went away. And now the same pattern was playing out again, reaching into something deeply personal and using the institution to justify it. This time, Edward did not stay quiet. His lawyers responded with a document that shut the argument down at its root. A deed of gift signed by Elizabeth in 1999, clearly stating that the Enthymion's tiara was classified as a private wedding present. Not a state loan, not a shared asset, not something held in trust. It belonged to Sophie. Elizabeth had also given Sophie the Royal Victorian Order, an honor given personally by the monarch for direct service. So look at the full picture. Elizabeth gave her that honor. She gave her a wedding tiara. Then she signed a legal document confirming it was hers. That is a queen making a very direct statement about who she trusted. And Edward had gone even further than anyone realized. Years earlier, in 1999, he had worked with royal jewelers to create a matching set of black and white pearl jewelry for Sophie. Sade necklace and earrings designed to sit perfectly with the Enthymion's tiara. The materials were funded through the crown. But Edward held the design rights. His lawyers argued that the tiara and the pearl set formed a single artistic unit tied to Edward's own design work. You cannot remove the tiara without breaking that unit, and that gives him another layer of legal protection. Behind all of this sat something deeply personal. Sophie wore that tiara on her wedding day. Then, at a palace reception in 2019, in the middle of a speech in front of senior royals and important guests, she turned toward Queen Elizabeth II and said, "Mama, it was not planned. It just slipped out in a room where every word is usually carefully controlled." And it showed exactly how Sophie saw her. The woman who signed that deed of gift was the woman she called her mother. And now another woman was trying to take that away. Hit that like button and subscribe to Royal Report Daily right now. By the afternoon of March 25, 2026, the situation reached a breaking point. Edward's legal team delivered a direct warning. If the claim on the tiara was not dropped by end of day, they would release private letters written by Elizabeth. Letters that clearly stated her wish for Sophie to keep full ownership of her personal jewelry. And according to those close to the situation, those letters included words about Camilla, words about the years of cold distance, the tension that never fully disappeared, the long journey before Elizabeth ever accepted her. Charles had spent years carefully rebuilding Camilla's image, turning her from a deeply unpopular figure into queen consort. Those letters could destroy all of that work in a single day. This was no longer about a tiara. It was about control, reputation, and legacy. By the evening of March 25th, the Enthymion's tiara remained in Sophie's possession. Edward had it secured in a high-security private safe under the direct control of his own security team. No one was going to quietly take it, review it, or reclassify it without a fight. Edward had drawn his line. But pressure on paper was never going to be enough to finish this. What came next was not legal. It was personal. And it walked through the door in the form of Princess Anne. Royal Report Daily, bringing you the truth behind every royal headline. By the afternoon of March 25th, the fight had moved out of offices and into a private room inside Buckingham Palace. And when Princess Anne walked in, everything shifted. There was no small talk, no polite opening, no effort to soften what was about to be said. She went straight to the point. But to understand why that moment carried so much weight, you have to understand what changed in the years before it. Anne and Sophie were not always close. As recently as 2021, it was clear to anyone watching that Anne kept her distance. She has always been that way. She does not pretend to feel something she does not. Then April 2021 happened. Prince Philip died. That loss changed the entire structure inside the family. Both Anne and Sophie stepped forward to support Queen Elizabeth II in her final year. They began seeing each other almost every single day, and over time that distance between them completely disappeared. By the time of Elizabeth's funeral in September 2022, the change was visible to everyone. As they stood waiting for the coffin, Sophie quietly reached out and placed her hand on Anne's back. It was a small gesture, but it was real. It showed trust. And by March 2026, that quiet connection had turned into something strong, something protective, and something ready to act. So when Princess Anne walked into that meeting with King Charles III, she was not there as Edward's sister. She was there to defend what their mother had already decided. She told Charles that if he allowed this to continue, If he allowed private gifts from their mother to be questioned, reclassified, or taken back, then the word of a monarch would mean nothing. Then she delivered the line that stopped the entire room. If our mother's signature on a lease or a deed of gift is not worth the paper it's written on today, then your signature will be worth even less tomorrow. Anne was attacking the very foundation of royal authority. A king's power only works if people trust what he has signed. That trust does not start with him. It comes from every monarch who came before him. Break that chain and everything weakens. She had also reviewed the Bagshot Park documents herself. She knew exactly what Edward had paid, what he had signed, and what the Crown estate had officially agreed to. Her position was direct. Edward paid for that home. The Crown estate took his money under those exact terms. That agreement stands, and she did not treat the tiara and the house as two separate disputes. She made it very clear they were the same fight. If they succeed in taking one, they open the door to take the other. And once that door is open, nothing Elizabeth ever signed is safe anymore. There was a painful personal dimension to all of this that involved Sophie directly. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, lost her own mother when she was very young. Over the years, Queen Elizabeth II became the closest thing she ever had to a mother figure. Anne understood exactly what that meant. She had lost her father in 2021, then her mother in 2022. She knows very well what it feels like when those connections are gone, and all that remains are the things they left behind. So when the tiara and the home were targeted, Anne did not see paperwork. She saw something being taken from someone who had already lost more than enough. Anne had also seen this pattern before. She was close to Princess Diana. She watched how Diana's position was slowly broken down, the removal of her HRH title, the isolation, the loss of support. She saw a woman give everything to the monarchy and then get pushed aside. Now she was watching the same kind of pressure build again. A different person, but the same pattern. And she was not going to stay quiet this time. Don't miss a single update. Subscribe to Royal Report Daily right now. Then she went further. She told Charles that if Camilla did not stop, she would act. Not privately, publicly. She would personally oversee a full audit of the Queen's household. Not just basic numbers. Everything. Expenses, staffing, money allocations tied to Queen Camilla herself. That threat landed very hard. Because Anne is the one person in the entire family who could make it real and actually be believed. If she says she will expose something, people listen. She also brought up Edward's children. There had been quiet pressure to push James, Earl of Wessex, and Lady Louise Windsor into full private status earlier than planned. Anne stopped that immediately. She made it crystal clear that this decision belongs to the parents and the children themselves, not to Queen Camilla. And this mattered to Anne for a very personal reason. She chose a private life for her own children years ago, but that was her choice, made freely without pressure from anyone. What she was seeing now was completely different. This was pressure, and she was not going to allow it. By the time the meeting ended, the situation had completely changed. Charles was left with two options, both of them bad. He could back Camilla and risk destroying the credibility of his own royal authority. Or he could step back and accept that some lines simply cannot be crossed. There was no clean way out. And as Anne walked out of that room, one thing was absolutely clear. This was no longer just Edward's fight. It had become a direct challenge to the king himself. Subscribe to Royal Report Daily and stay connected. After reviewing the full dossier, King Charles III's own legal team delivered their conclusion. The position of Prince Edward was virtually unbreakable. Every single piece of evidence held. No royal order could override it. Charles had lost that fight. He had operated for years on the belief that as king, as the one who granted the dukedom in April 2023, he still held control over everything that came with it. His own lawyers told him in writing that he did not. What his mother gave Edward was not temporary. It was a legal inheritance, and it was completely out of his reach. That alone was enough to shake him. But the letter witnessed by Philip hit even harder. Charles knew his mother had always protected Edward and Sophie, but he did not know that Philip, in the final stage of his life, had formally backed that protection in writing. That detail changed everything, because it meant this was not just Elizabeth's decision alone. It was both of them together. Late on March 25, 2026, A formal note was sent from the office of the Master of the Jewel House to Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. It was short and direct. No emotion. No explanation. The Anthemian tiara would remain under her exclusive private control. At the same time, the review of Bagshot Park was quietly shut down. The official wording described it as recognition of the Edinburgh household's role in maintaining the estate. But inside the palace, no one misunderstood what had just happened. The crown had stepped back. Everything Prince Edward held was confirmed. The title, the home, the tiara, all of it stood exactly where Queen Elizabeth II had placed it. And that confirmation changed the entire balance inside the family, because this was now a permanent record. That note will sit in the royal archives long after everyone involved is gone. And when it is read in the future, its meaning will be completely clear. A claim was made, it failed, and the institution was forced to admit that failure in writing. Hit that like button and subscribe to Royal Report Daily right now. But the outcome did not bring peace. It came with a cost that cannot be repaired. The relationship between King Charles III and Edward has changed completely. It is no longer personal and warm. It is controlled, formal, and limited to official duty. The public will see unity. They will see public appearances. They will see two brothers standing side by side at royal events. But inside the family, everyone will know what is real. They will know that one of them had to use the law to protect himself from the other. And that does not go away. The structure of the monarchy has shifted because of it. There are now two very clear centers of power. At Buckingham Palace, Queen Camilla and Charles continue to push their vision of a controlled, streamlined monarchy. Away from that center, another group has quietly formed. Princess Anne, Edward and Sophie, supported quietly by Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. They are not operating loudly, but they are holding a line, protecting what was built before and refusing to let it be quietly rewritten. And that divide is now fixed. For James, Earl of Wessex, and Lady Louise Windsor, this moment will not be forgotten. They watched their father fight without any public drama. He did it through documents, through careful preparation, through complete control, and he forced the system to back down. One day, James will carry the Duke of Edinburgh title, the same title his grandfather held for more than 70 years. But he will carry it with a very different understanding. He will know that the institution that gives can also try to take back. That knowledge changes everything. It does not create loyalty. It creates caution. And that caution will shape how he stands inside that system for the rest of his life. As for Charles, and he has his monarchy, he has his structure, he has his authority. But what he no longer has is the full trust of the brother who stood quietly for decades, paid his own way, and asked for nothing except to keep what was given to him. That loss does not show on paper, but it will show over time. And long after the documents are filed and the silence settles, that is the part that will remain. That was today's full story here on Royal Report Daily. If this reporting matters to you, hit that subscribe button. Turn on your notifications. Share this video with everyone who wants to understand the real power dynamics inside the House of Windsor in 2026, because we are not done. There is much more to come, right here on Royal Report Daily.